You know, we've been diving into some questions the last few weeks, and they've been rather interesting. And this week, a question came up that I thought was incredibly interesting. And it's a question that sounds like this: why church? Why church? It's honestly such an interesting question, and I want us to explore this question together and look at a verse that gives us some insight and some context to the kind of conversation that we're about to have. So in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, it reads, "As iron sharpens iron, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." I love this imagery, this visualization of iron sharpening iron, because it gives us a reminder that people aren't born great. They are forged to be great. And a lot of times in a faith space, when we know that God's given us a calling, we kind of get frustrated when we know that God's called us to something, but we haven't arrived. Have you ever felt like that? Like, God, I know you called me for greatness. You called me to do something great, but why am I currently working at UPS? Like, God, you called me to establish beautiful and wonderful things around the world, but I'm stuck in a place that doesn't seem to have anything to do to where you are taking me and calling me. And the truth is that God doesn't work like you and I. What God does in your life, when you have a calling in your life, is that He refines you. Because your calling is something like a progression rather than a place that you arrive. It might take your whole life to fully come into the attributes and the calling that God has called for you. And oftentimes we skip, or we want to skip, a process of refinement that looks like iron sharpening iron. See, when I think of somebody that's great in the scriptures, I think of everybody's favorite king. Nobody knows any other king except this king, David. David is considered a great man, a great king. And David was somebody that was anointed younger than most of the people in this room. Anointed to be king. But before he was a king, he was a warrior. And before he was a warrior, he was a shepherd. And so a lot of us in our lives, we know that God's called us to take on a title of great things, but we are so afraid of starting small. And we wonder why God uses things that are small, that seem insignificant, except that what God's concerned about is not your position or your title. He's concerned about your character. And so we want to be where we are, unseen, unknown. But we know God's called us to be a king, but we don't want to become the warrior first. And we then, while being in battles that are difficult, that are hard, we won't even see them through if our focus is to become a king, not to serve people. See, what I love about the heart of a warrior is that they're willing to risk their lives, their health, everything that they have for the people that they're fighting for. And so David goes through this progression of first being an unknown child that was neglected by his dad, who was simply just in charge of sheep. But in that process of being unknown, of being unconsidered, he was faithful to the things that his father had entrusted him with. And when he was faithful to the things that his father entrusted him with, it opened up the opportunity for him to meet the opposition that the whole nation was afraid to face. And when he steps into these moments where a giant is ahead of him, it is because he was faithful when no one was seeing him that he is able to step up and be the greatest need that his nation has. Because he met the need that his father had in his life, he was able to meet the needs that the nation had. And that opportunity gave him the chance to fight for the people that he would later be the king of. And so God, why did you call us for great things? Why did you ask us to wonder what our journey is, what our, dare I say it, what we think our destiny is? Why did you tell us those things, but we're still stuck serving dishes to people that are not grateful for our service? Ever felt like that? And I know everybody's heard the saying, iron sharpens iron, but the question is do you live it? See, what I love about professional athletes, skilled musicians, masterful craftsmen, is that they want to achieve the highest level possible that they can achieve in their respective expertise and space of influence. They don't just understand that iron sharpens iron. They are counting on iron sharpening iron. They are counting on this process, this ideal to improve their area of expertise, even if it's an inch of a difference. You know, they say, I love Formula One, and I watch those guys race, and it's insane. And the vehicle, if it's by an increment, an inch, just a hair better than the other vehicle, it can be the difference between 12th place and first place. And people who are professional, who have devoted their life to fulfill something great, they count on iron sharpening iron to make the increments of improvement in their life because they're focused to improve exponentially, to be the most effective and efficient in whatever space they are on. And maybe you think to yourself, well, I'm not trying to be great at anything. Honestly, I'm not great at anything. And that's not really for me. I don't even have an expertise. Anybody in here have an expertise? Nobody. This talk is going to go over your head. I don't want to be an expert. I kind of just want to be a person, you know what I mean? It's so exhausting. But what you need to realize is that you have an expertise. You have an expertise. You are an expert on you. No one knows how to be you. No one more than you can be you. See, there are people in your life that know you better than you do sometimes, but that's only because you're not acting like how you are supposed to act. They only tell you, what are you doing when you are outside of your normal character? But no one can be who you are, uniquely created, uniquely structured. Yes. No one can be you. And what happens when you don't take the required steps to get better is that you progress in life, but you stay the same. You don't grow in your capacity. You don't grow in your understanding. And what you do is you age, but you still deal with the same issues in the same mindset. But when you move from simply knowing that iron sharpens iron to living iron sharpens iron, you begin to get better and better and better and better. Because you begin to create a space in your life for people who have the best interest in you to call you up. Iron sharpens iron. See, it's the refinement process in our lives that actually sharpen us and cuts away at the things in your life that make you dull. I actually think it's because we're dull that we can't overcome temptation. I actually think it's because we're dull that we succumb to apathy. Some of you rather be apathetic, which means absolutely do nothing, than to sin. You think that the alternative for you to live a holy life is absolutely doing nothing in your life. Thinking that what gives you power over sin is you doing nothing. And sometimes I wonder to myself, is God bored with me? Because God's called me to do so many different things, but because I'm afraid of messing it up, I'm afraid of sinning, I do not do anything. And we think that what helps us overcome sin, what helps us overcome mindsets that have destroyed us and binded us is doing nothing, when really it's the sharp soul that gets on his hands and his knees and prays for change to happen in their life. Because what gives you the strength to overcome the circumstances in your life is when you cut away at things that do not belong in your life. So the church allows for the context of sharpening each other. From the oldest to the youngest. Old people, they give us a perspective on life, a perspective of, I've already lived this. And young people give old people the perspective of how about there's a new way. And what the church allows is for multiple perspectives, different backgrounds to sharpen each other for the interest of creating a character that is more like Jesus. Cutting away. Most of the time, just shaping us. Because I did a little bit of studying on this verse. I know it's like 2 sentences, but there's a lot of deep knowledge in here. On how weapons are created. And you know what I realized? A sword can't sharpen a sword. Who would have thought? When a sword clashes with another sword, what happens is that the sword actually becomes dull. That the two swords, when they are of equivalent force, break each other apart, don't make each other sharper. And so many times we stay in our comfort zone with people that agree with us, that have the similar perspective than us, thinking that sharpens us, but really that makes us dull. A hammer cannot sharpen a hammer. But you know what a hammer can do is form a weapon for battle. If there are people in your life that you bounce ideas off of, that you almost fence with, I have many of those friends. Fence, we're not trying to kill each other. We're just debating, thinking, having a dance, this beautiful symphony of stupid arguments and questions. And that's so important. But what will bring an edge to who you are is to have a perspective that is different than you and may shape you to be more effective with what you do in your life. And sometimes we're more comfortable with being in our comfort zone, and we prevent ourselves from experiencing a different perspective that will strengthen us. So why church? Oh, and by the way, surround yourself with people who are invested in growing with you. Because there's nothing more detrimental to your growth than having an apathetic person be part of your life who doesn't want to grow. If you're surrounded by people who do not want to grow with you, they will be more like an anchor that keeps you from sailing on the journey of your life than the wind in your sails. I remember when Kara and I were in Cancun, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences we've ever had. We went kayaking, and I remember when we were about to kayak in the caves of Cancun, I remember a good mentor of mine, old man, sage, wizard, very old, very filled with experience. He said some of the most profound words to me when I remember that. We were gearing up, we were putting on our helmets, signing our life away because, we might die. And we were there and we were together, and I remember this mentor telling us this, and it's something along the lines of, you'll know, he said, you'll know if you'll make it in marriage if you can make it through kayaking together. And I remember that, and I was locked in. And I think Kara remembered that too. And we got in there, and boy, man, we were synchronized. We were ready. Left, right. Military people in that moment. Clockwork, just beautiful. And I started getting a little cocky. And there was a couple in front of us, much, much older, not too far ahead of us, but so slow and pathetic. Just spinning, out of control, just. And I looked at Kara with my cynical old tone and I said, we're better than them. We're going to make it. But this is such a good metaphor for life, because life will get hard to navigate through. Trials and difficulties will come your way. And if the people you're doing life with aren't committed to seeing it through with you, you will spin out of control. And this is where the motive of refinement is essential. Because if you want to be sharp and ready to face life, you need people with you that aren't exactly the same as you, but that want to do life with you and push each other to your limits. Otherwise, you're going to be in a boat with a bunch of people trying to paddle somewhere where you are not supposed to go. So the church was established by Jesus so that we would sharpen each other and be committed to one another. I love what Tony did this morning. Kathleen's he didn't do the generosity talk this morning. And Kathleen was like, somebody's got to do it. And I love to press people, I really do. If you guys ever become part of our team, boy, I will throw you in the deep end, because that's the only way we learn. And I go, all right, so we need somebody to do it. Last minute notice. And we suggested Dinesha. Dinesha was like, give me some time. So that's okay, it's okay. It's okay. And then Tony walks in through the door and he goes, I'll do it. I was like, can we give him a round of applause? That was awesome. And quickly, I saw Tony, who was stacking chairs, become one of the people who was going to pour his soul and his heart into the people here, from one moment to the other. I said, let's get together. We looked up scriptures. We talked about it. He had under 20 minutes to prepare for a talk. Now, I think up here, you think it's easy. This is so easy. He's just talking. It's hard to talk, especially when no one is talking back at you. And he stepped up to it. I made him uncomfortable. I pushed him to it. He was saying some things. I was like, let's refine it here without trying to make him me, but making him more of who he is. And I commend you for that, because that moment right there summarizes and gives the sum total of what church is really about, and the calling that God has in our lives is that if you don't understand that we're not going to be perfect up here, but we're attempting to be better, then you don't know where we're headed. You don't know what we're trying to accomplish. When one of us is up here sacrificing their pride and speaking to you, what they are doing is allowing God to show up in their life in a way that they have not experienced before. So what do we do with those people? We cheer them on. Because people who are willing are people that God is going to use. So then the honest question is, okay, well, why the church? Great. For what? I mean, this is a nice building, but for what? And there's an incredible moment in Mark that gives us insight into this. In Mark chapter 9, verse 33 through 36, it reads this. They came to Capernaum when he was in the house. He asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. That's awesome. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. First of all, I love how nobody responded because they were afraid that Jesus might know. And Jesus just responds. Gotta love God, yo. This scripture was always so intriguing to me. You can read this and think to yourself, wow, why are these people so competitive? But I know some of you. You heard this and you said, there's a scoreboard. How do I get on it? Top 15, how do I do it? How do I earn my points? You're going like, you go get him, Peter! We don't know if Peter said it, but come on, it was definitely Peter, right? I'm the greatest out of us. I love that he said amongst them, because Jesus, that doesn't count. That's a cheat code. He's the greatest, so who's the greatest among us? You know, very religious. It's so funny to me. And some of you, the reason why you find this moment like incredible, even hysterical, even relatable, is because you're competitive too. I saw you yesterday trying to suck juice out of a baby bottle at my baby shower. A dude pulled out a knife because he wasn't winning fast enough and stabbed it. You're out, dude. You can't stab a baby bottle. It's so true that the other day we were playing a board game. We decided to do a board game night. And we got together and it was everything except a board game night. There was smack talk. Your mama's being thrown around everywhere. I'm better than you. A bunch of chaos, noise, loud noise, throwing things. There was a shouting match in the living room of Carla's house. Poor Carla's parents. It was intense. It was insane, and people were like, this is overwhelming. And I'm like, you're weak-minded. Because this is where I thrive, in the competition of this moment. This is where I show up. You guys are dumb, like, I got this. It's so repetitive. I know you guys. And you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with being competitive. If anything, I think we should be more competitive, but with things that are actually meaningful. When there is a need in the world, often we let other people go ahead and do something that we know God's called us to. And when there's a need in the world, God wants us to be the first responders. You know what it means to be a first responder? You're first. The first to meet the needs. When work starts to take over your family time and money becomes a priority, then you need to compete against greed. We need to refocus our intentions when you are tired and at the end of yourself, compete against apathy, keeping you from growing. When we are tired and simply anything is too much to be asked to do, what we need to choose is to compete against our tiredness and keep going. See, I think competition and being competitive and the competitive spirit is not wrong. But our focus, our alignment, our intention is. See, God isn't against you wanting to do great things. I know in church it's like, you want to be great? You're prideful. You want to do something meaningful? That doesn't belong here. But God isn't against you wanting to do great things. But I do think that if our greatness is centered in ourselves, then we've missed the mark. And we've missed the mark. See, Jesus is so intentional with his language. Jesus masterfully grabs words and punctuations and commas and semicolons, and he uses beautiful metaphors that give us deep truths. Jesus knows how to speak, and he uses every word with purpose and precision. And so it says here, Jesus called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. Jesus did not say, don't be great. Jesus didn't say, you cannot be great. You cannot do anything great. What Jesus is telling us, what Jesus is communicating to us, is that the greatest among you is actually the greatest servant. That was one of those moments, you guys are listening or I lost you? It's the greatest servant. Because where there is a great need, there must be people with a great desire and great compassion to meet it. So yeah, do you want to do something that is great? Do them. But if you're going to do anything that is meaningful and anything that is great, do it for others. I mean, you have to understand, if there was any moment in the scriptures for God to say, I am against anyone being great, this would be the moment. This would be the moment where Jesus would say, you cannot be great. You cannot be a great servant. You cannot be a great person. You cannot accomplish great things. But sometimes we confuse the fact that God's not looking for our greatness for not aspiring to greatness. Just because God doesn't need you to be great in order for you to be qualified, it doesn't mean that he doesn't call you to great needs or to push beyond what you think you are capable of accomplishing. What Jesus does is he grabs that competitive spirit. Most of you are very competitive. I played one game with Dr. Beital and I knew he's competitive. Very competitive. Jesus is not against that innate feeling that we have within ourselves to be excellent. I remember one of my great friends, Josh, he said one of the most complimentary things to me ever, which I think was also a dig. I'm not sure. I have to ask him. But he said, man, Juan, you really only strive for excellence. And I was like, really? You really think so? This is like what I do. And he was like, no, I want to be more like you sometimes. I'm like, So Jesus is not against that competitive spirit, that drive to do something great. But what he does is he redirects us. He grabs our potential, and what he does is make it about serving others. So what for is the church? To be the greatest servants that the world has ever known. Because our pursuit for greatness is not of opulence. It's not of self-ambition or self-interest. Our pursuit is to be like Jesus, the greatest servant of all. And when we come together as the church in times of need, when we get together on a Sunday during the week, when we do life together, what we are doing is declaring and announcing to the world that Jesus still lives. And he lives in you. You want to be the greatest? Be the last. And serve with everything you've got. With everything you've got. There's another scripture in Matthew chapter 20, verse 26, 28. That last portion just didn't suffice your soul because you still think that God is against competition. It says this, Matthew 20, 26. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Not even last place. Slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as ransom for many. Jesus makes it so clear to us that when we choose to follow him, we take on the titles of servants. That wherever God is going to take us is going to be a place greater than our capacity and our ability. Not to be the main focus, but to be the pillars, to be the hands and the feet, the backs in which the world can see that Jesus still lives amongst us. And Jesus says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Do you know what Jesus is saying here? What he's encapsulating, wants to drive into our soul, is that if you claim to want to make great change, serve greatly. See, my dream is for this space to just be packed to the gills, so packed that people have to stand or sit on the floor because they think that there's something happening in here, that God is just moving in a way that they've never seen before. That's my dream. I hope that we run out of chairs. I hope that we run out of space. But if having this place packed is my reason for being in here, then everything we do is in vain. If greatness and wanting to make an impact in the world is for self-gain and not giving every bit that we have away, then we've lost the reason for why the church exists. Because the church is not built on numbers. The church is built on people. The church is built on needs. The church is built because men and women have decided to devote their lives to make the world a better place. We are not here because we are here. We are here because God thinks that we are needed and can be used. So if your greatness starts and ends with you, and you're part of this church, you're part of a body, of a group of people, then the group will be only about you and not about what you can give to others. I believe that we are here because we are needed. So the truth is, when asking the question, is why church? And what for? Well, the truth is to push us amongst each other, meet our needs, to help us elevate. Have you ever been in a room where a man or a woman walks into the room and the room elevates? Where everybody says, I'm not competing against him for greatness. I'm participating in the greatness that God is doing in this place. See, the church exists so that we would cut away on all the dead things in our life. That we would cut away at all the things that do not serve us but take life from us. And that other people would speak into our lives and press us and shape us while we are in the pursuit to serve the world. That is why the church exists, to set a course for humanity. That God lives and that we are alive to declare it. And so I want to challenge you this morning to do the same with the people that you do life with. Because church is not a building. Take away this building, we're still here. Church is not a speaker. Church is not equipment. Why the church? So that the church would be the epicenter of generosity and of love and extraordinary compassion towards the world. I miss you, Kathleen. Kathleen's over there teaching children today because we had a need. He stooped down from being up here and refining his craft so he could talk to children about the same topic that you and I are talking about. I consider Kathleen not only my best friend, but one of the greatest servants that I've ever met. And he pushes me more than anyone else but my wife. Not because he tells me, Juan, let's go, but because he simply wants to give everything that he has and who he is for God. You want to be the first? God redirects it. It's humility. You want to be a great church, you want to make great impact, serve greatly. I challenge you to aspire to be with one another and sharpen each other and grow to be who God's called us to be. Not for the sake of your own greatness, but because of the movement of Jesus is still prevalent today. Why church? Because you. Can you stand with me? It's our duty, our honor, our task, our demand as some of the leaders of a house to figure out ways to give back to the city. And we're figuring out what can we best do, where can we meet a need, not just repeat a program, but do something different and meaningful for those who do not have anything. You see, right now we're in a space that is considered in Naples not the finest wine that you can find in Naples, not the finest real estate. But this is where God has placed us because there's a great need. And whatever challenge we may have, we need to be devoted to God and committed to ourselves to give these people the best that we could give them, because to some of them, they've never experienced the best being given to them. They haven't experienced the best service. They haven't experienced the most giving. They haven't experienced the most love. And we are here as a church to impact where we are by being and doing life together. It's not just a mantra. It's not just a motto that we have in a house. It's the reality of why the church exists, to do life together. So I want to pray this morning. I want to pray that God would fill your soul with courage, with bravery, with an audacity to use that drive that you have in you for excellence and of greatness and channel it to serving people. To heed the instruction and the advice of people that have lived beyond you and before you, and the same for those who are just brand new to life. There's something beautiful about somebody who just is living. They see life with so many colors and so much wonder and curiosity. And there's so much value in someone who's lived a long life that they have wisdom attached to memories and experiences. We are the declaration of God on earth. So Father, I pray this morning that you would captivate the souls of every individual in this space and move them, God, to serve greatly. God bless, guys. I love y'all. Thank you for coming out. You can clap. It's okay.